Let's take a look at block states. Alright, we find ourselves back in the tutorial once more, and in this tutorial we're going to be talking about block state and block state properties. So block states, of course, we've already seen the JSON files for the block states. If I were to, for example, take a look at the jumpy block states JSON file over here, you can see that we have variants, but we just have an empty variant. This was the standard block states JSON file for a normal block, let's say, and there are also blocks that have different variants that point then to different models. The best example to take a look at is actually the RedstoneOreBlock. So what we're going to do is we're going to press the Shift key twice and search for RedstoneOreBlock. This one right here. So let's just click on this and then we can actually take a look at this block. What's very interesting here is that it has a static field over here called lit. That is a Boolean property, and this is exactly the thing that we're going to need to add, because there is a difference between a block and a block state, and this is a very important difference for you to understand. The block class represents the idea of a block, while the block state is the actual block inside of the world. Meaning that, for example, if we go down a little bit, we can see in this light method right here, world.setBlockState. It's not called setBlock, and even if it was, we still need to pass in a block state because that is the actual instance of this block inside of the world. Because if I set down two RedstoneOreBlocks, they are both RedstoneOreBlocks, but they are different blocks, right? They're different instances of the same thing. So that is why there are block states and blocks. And these block state properties basically allow us to add properties to the block states and not the block. This is why you can't just add an integer to this block class in this case, and it would work. That actually wouldn't work because the integer would actually be shared across all block states in the world that are of this block type. So that is why that doesn't work, and that is why we need to use these properties over here. Now, the best way to actually try this out is to just make something ourselves. So in our custom block package, we're going to right-click New Java class, and this is going to be the Tanzanite lamp block. There you go. And this will extend the block class. Let's hover over this, create constructor matching super. And now the first thing we want to do is we want to add a new property. So let's just add a public static final Boolean property. This one right here from net Minecraft state property called lit. And this is equal to Boolean property.of, and then passing in a name that is going to be called lit over here. And that is all that we need to do. And this is how easy it can be to actually add a custom Boolean property, or a custom property anyway, because if we actually middle mouse and click on this, I believe what we can do is we can then click on the property, press Ctrl H, and we can see there are Boolean properties, there are enum properties, and there are int properties. So those are basically the things that you can save in block states. You know, together with those, you can create all sorts of different variants of your block. And what we then have to do, this is very important, when you add a block property to your block, you need to call the append properties method and then do builder.add and add the block state property inside of the builder. So this is very important to do this, otherwise it's not going to work. And now we can basically change this property here, and then by changing it, we can then refer to a different model, which we're going to see in just a moment in the block states JSON file, but we can then refer to a different model. So we're going to override the onUse method again. This is the method that when we right click it, we actually do something. And we're going to say, hey, if we are not on the client, so if not world.isClient, there you go, and hand equals hand.mainHand. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say world.setBlockState at the position that we're at, and then we're going to say state.cycle lit. What does all of this craziness do? Well, this should be fairly self-explanatory, right? We're only doing this on the server in this case, and then also we are only doing this with the main hand. Please note the exclamation mark here in front of the isClient, meaning that we're negating isClient, meaning we want to be on the server, not on the client. Because we can only set block states on the server, which should make a lot of sense, right? You don't want, if a client connects to your server, you don't want that client to just be able to set blocks to anything that they want, right? They could just be like, oh, diamond block, diamond block, diamond block. And then all of a sudden, you know, the economy of the server crashes because everyone can just set any block to diamond blocks. That is why this has to happen on the server. And then the state cycle here simply cycles through the possible values of this particular property. Now, because it's a Boolean property, there are only two possible values, true or false. So this simply means that we're changing it from true to false or from false to true. That is basically what the cycle does. And that is actually all we need in this class. So let's just create the actual block here as well. Let's register it. So this is going to be the Tanzanite underscore lamp. And then same thing right here in the register block, Tanzanite underscore lamp. Now this is going to be very important. Once again, a new Tanzanite lamp block over here. And then this is all fine. I want to add another method call on the fabric block settings, and that is the luminance over here. So what we're going to do is put in state and then an arrow, and then we're going to return the following. We're going to say state.get tanzanite block lamp block.lit $15:0. Now this might be absolute insanity to you, right? You might be like, I don't even know what is going on here. Well, let's first of all go through. This is a toInt function of block state. This simply means we have a block state over here, and we want to return an integer. That is all that means. And what we have is we are saying, okay, the state of this particular block, right? So we're getting a block state. If that is lit, right? So if this is true, then we want to return a luminance value of 15, meaning that we want this to shed light at a strength of 15, so light level 15. And if this is false, so if the actual lamp is not lit, then we want to return a light level of 0. That is all that's happening here, so nothing too crazy when you really think about it. Right, continue along, and now how does the block state JSON file looks like? Well, let's just copy over the one from the Tanzanite block over here, drag it into the same folder while holding control, and we're going to rename it to Tanzanite_lamp. And if we then take a look at this, well, we are, of course, now have different variants over here, right? So we have maybe a lamp block that is on, right? And then let's just press Control D to duplicate it. And then we have one that is turned off, right? So those are going to be two different model files, but we somehow need to, well, say it. What are the variants here? Well, the variant is just lit equals true when we want the on texture to be shown, and then lit equals false if you want the off texture to be shown. Or rather, when we want it to point to the different model, but usually in the different models, you want to change or point to different textures. That is the general idea. Now you might ask, where does this come from, right? This lit? Well, that is actually what we have defined over here. So this name right here has to match the name inside of the JSON file right here, and then that should be fine. Let's add the translation as well. This is just going to be the Tanzanite_lamp. And then of course right here as well, Tanzanite lamp. And then in the models, the block model files, I will actually copy them over. Now, those are just normal block model files. They are not any different than the other ones. You can see they just point to one texture with cube all. They are just named in a way that when we actually, let's close a few things over here, right? So they just named this one right here. So Tanzanite_lamp on, Tanzanite lamp on, and then points to a Tanzanite lamp on texture. And then the same thing for the off one. You can see Tanzanite lamp off, points to a different texture, and it's called off. And then this is exactly the block model file that is referenced right here. When it comes to the item model file, well, this one, of course, once again, needs to be named after the actual block, but it points to the lamp off block model file so that the block that appears in the inventory actually looks like it's off. Let's add the textures over here as well. There we go. And that should be pretty much all that we need to do to add this. So it isn't that crazy. Now, of course, there are examples of blocks that have an insane amount of different properties, right? So I can recommend, you can of course look at this, click on block, press Ctrl H, and then you can see all of the blocks. Now the RedstoneOreBlock, I really recommend looking at this a little bit more because this is, let's say, fairly easy to understand because it only has one block property. If we were, for example, to look at something like the tripwire hook, you can see there are 3 different properties and voxel shapes and all of the craziness. This is why I don't usually recommend going into every block. Some of them are quite complicated, but yeah, the RedstoneOreBlock is probably the best vanilla example to look at this. Otherwise, you can of course also look at some other vanilla examples as well. Whatever the case may be, let's enter the game and see if it works. Alright, we find ourselves in Minecraft, and let's see, there we are. The Tanzanite lamp has been added, and if I set it down, you can see we have a texture, and it is also emitting light, and if I right click it, you can see the texture changes and the light turns off as well. So that is pretty much, and that's how easy it is to add a block with different block state properties to Minecraft. Right, and that already concludes this tutorial right here. I hope you found this useful and you learned something new, and I'll see you all in the next tutorial. So yeah.